Hello, my friends. What do you think astrology is? This is a controversial topic. There are many, many opinions. One idea that has been proposed in recent years has become popular among some astrologers is that astrology is divination. I'm going to answer the question, is astrology divination? And we're going to look at other ideas about what astrology is. I'm going to present some new material to answer this question, is astrology divination? And the broader question, what the heck is astrology? Superstition? Science? What is it? Let's first address the topic of divination. What is divination? What do we mean by divination? Let me give some background ideas, and then I'll give you a definition of divination. But first, we need some background information. Consider how much of life is really random. For example, you go shopping and you get in line to check out, and there's somebody in front of you, there's somebody in back of you. You know, it seems random, like you just happen to show up at the store, they happen to show up at the store. It's just random, the people we encounter. Are there hidden variables? Is possibly it not so random? Perhaps our thoughts and our feelings are attracting to us and repelling from us particular things. How much is random? We don't know. Are there unseen forces? Perhaps past lives. Perhaps astrology does work. Perhaps there's biochemistry involved, things like pheromones and other things, sending off signals. The more we think about it, the more we might come to the conclusion that there are some attractive mechanisms going on, that it's not as random as it seems. But I think most of us tend to think that a lot of our incidental experiences, who we bump into as we're moving around through the day, things that happen, I think we tend to think of them as random. Take, for example, a birthmark. Suppose you have a birthmark on your left arm near your wrist. It seems like, just the genes came out that way, that's what happened. Some people believe that it's connected to past lives. People have had dreams, or they talk to children, and they have these memories that seem to indicate there could be more reasons for it. It's not just random. So that's another possible variable. Past lives or something like that. We just don't know how much is random. So in the case of the birthmark, maybe in a past life you were in a fatal accident and that part of your arm was injured. And somehow that memory, that force is traveling through like a cause and effect thing and traveling into you now. Seems far-fetched, but maybe things are not quite as random as they seem. So now we get to the idea of divination. Let's suppose that most of life is not random. There are all these things we don't know yet. Maybe astrology works. Maybe our thoughts and feelings are doing more than we think. Maybe a lot of it is unconscious. Maybe there are past lives. Maybe there's millions and millions of things going on that we just don't really know about yet. And there's very little randomness. Now, what if that was true? I'm just saying what if. I'm not saying it's true. Let's just entertain the possibility. A lot of our lives it's just not random. If that's true, I have here in point 2, in bold, if, capital S, if that's true, then nearly everything in our lives is telling us something. Possibly. I'm just follow the logic here. If the person who's in front of me online as I'm checking out at a store is not so random, then the fact that that person is there is telling me something about my unconscious thoughts, what I'm attracting, what I'm repelling, my past lives, the astrology, something. I don't know what it is, but it's telling me something. It's not just random. And in that case, almost everything we experience is revealing something about our thoughts, our feelings, our history, something. Right? I mean, if it's not random, there's a cause. and everything you're seeing is showing some history behind it. Something is going on. So this is where you get the idea of oracles, like sidewalk oracles. Wherever you're looking, whatever you're seeing is telling you something. At first it sounds like superstition. Like, oh, I saw a blue bird flying. It sounds like, okay, superstition. It's just a random thing. You're attaching meaning to things that have no meaning. It's kind of like a primitive, uncritical way of thinking. But you could argue just the opposite. That believing that it's all random is saying that there's very little causal stuff in our worlds. Most of it is just throwing dice and just whatever happened. Maybe if things have more causes and reasons than we believe, then we can be looking at everything to get information. Like, oh, I'm bumped into this person. That's telling me something, revealing something. There are revelations going on. There's information about our situation all the time. So maybe a belief in superstitious coincidences is sometimes, ironically, a more scientific perspective. That there are these unknown variables, and we can't see the variables, but we see the effects of the variables. So this leads us to divination. You're making observations to divine what messages, what information, what's going on. Your ability to observe, notice, and interpret. What is this telling me? So in a way, divination is maybe not as superstitious or non-scientific as it first seems. Maybe it's giving thought to all these things and thinking about where they're coming from. Why are they here? That's what divination is. So here's the definition. Divination is observing what is occurring in our lives. Just notice. And seeing what this tells us about the hidden variables. Assuming there's some hidden meaning, significance. Not necessarily just magically appearing out of nowhere. But that the world is coherent. Everything is interlaced and has extraordinary depth to it. Things have surfaced out of a large network of activities and energetic forces. So that's what divination is. Divination, you can look at, you don't have to look at it this way, but I'm proposing that divination is one way to think of it, and it's the way that I'm proposing we think about it in relationship to astrology, is that divination is the assumption that most things are not random, and if we look carefully, we think carefully, we analyze it carefully, we can get some good ideas as to what it's telling us. Now, in addition to that, point number 4 here on this slide, there are techniques to reveal, and instead of just randomly observing and saying, oh, well, I think this might mean this might mean that, there are some methods and techniques that can help reveal what these energetic forces or causes or purposes that are hidden, what they are. And here's one of the, you might say, tricks, one of the tools for doing it, is to set up a resonance. Set up some kind of activity, some kind of ritual or procedure that reflects procedures in nature. So, for example, the number 5 shows up a lot in life. 5 fingers, 5 toes. Many flowers have 5 petals. This 5, if we set up something to a rhythm of 5 and we repeat 5, it's creating a resonance, an association. It's like an invocation. It's like when you hit a note on, say, a guitar string, and another guitar string set to the same note starts vibrating. You're setting up a similarity that helps connect with those things. So setting up resonance with something in nature helps that part of nature connect with you and bring it out, just like a string can start vibrating. So a lot of divination practices are setting up resonance with fundamental principles of nature. That's what they are. Okay. So setting up this resonance amplifies the effect of the hidden variable to make it clearer, or the connection of that hidden variable to our lives. It makes it clearer. So by analogy, imagine a waltz. Dun, 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 dun. It has this gliding, flowing feeling as opposed to the more common 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's in most popular songs, for example. And we can think of these rhythms and beats as setting up connections with things in nature and in life. The frequencies and beats of sound. Sound is a frequency of light. Light, the different colors of light are different frequencies. When you set up a 9 beat, something repeating in 9, it sets out this resonance with everything that's in 9. And it appears to many people who work, you might say intuitively. I don't think we have any measurable scientific evidence for this, but from observation there's this widespread belief that 9 sets up a rhythm of healing, of nurturing, of support. Now actually we're starting to get scientific support for this idea in what we call vibrational astrology, where we see 9 vibration. We see who was born with 9 vibration, what characteristics they have, what qualities they have. We've done things like watch gold prices and other things in life and seeing what beats and rhythms the planets are in. And we're getting actual real data. This is the revolutionary thing. We're starting to see that some of these things that look like superstitions could actually be setting up a resonance and increasing the power of them. So, a lot of seemingly superstitious beliefs, like in the Catholic tradition, having a novena, 9 days of prayer or whatever, often for healing, related to a feminine power of healing, visualized as Mary. Maybe it's a real thing. There's a reason why this 9 works. It's setting up a resonance. So here's an idea, a concept for divination is divination's happening all the time. Everything you see, everything that's happening, well, maybe not everything, but a lot of it, giving you information. These are not all random things. There's maybe, like I said, past lives, who knows what. We're getting some solid evidence that there's forms of astrology that actually really work. There's been research on past lives that strongly suggests we humans do have access to information prior to birth. It's possible. And if so, divination makes sense. And setting up resonances increases the power to access the sources, the hidden variables behind what we're experiencing. And a lot of interesting coincidences connected with this. Take different sports. Baseball, the American sport of baseball, it's played around the world now. Baseball has a lot of 9. 9 players, 9 innings. Well, okay, 9, that's interesting. It's broken up into 9 sections, called innings, with 9 players. Also, there's some other things not as well known, but the baseball, it has these stitches around it. How many are there? 108, which is 12 times 9. And 108 is seen as kind of a powerful mystical number. So we're getting repeated, this emphasis on 9 throughout. And what kind of game is baseball? It's often a community feeling. As opposed to American football, which is much more dynamic, aggressive, every second, very engaging. Baseball, you can be sitting there watching, strike 1, strike 2. Of course, there are moments of intense excitement, but The football is a much more excitable game, like unstable, more injuries, more things happening, and a dynamic energy-packed game with 11 players. We found in our research that 11 beat within the cosmos creates this kind of energy. So the sports themselves are setting up resonance with the cosmos and enacting qualities and aspects of the universe according to what vibrations are put into motion. This is divination. Divination, observing what's occurring in your lives and seeing what the hidden variables are behind it. And in more, you might say, serious or focused divination, setting up a procedure to create that resonance. So, you can take, I've got here at the bottom of this slide, the 66 hexagrams of the I Ching. 64, did I say 66? The 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Setting up a resonance with a basic binary procedure, 2, 4, 8, 16, 64, etc. That is ubiquitous. All of our computer technology is built on this. Things like tarot cards, the exact number of cards, the number of suits, even just playing cards with the 4, diamonds and hearts, and spades and clubs, if I can remember them, relating to some fundamental things in nature and creating these resonances that make it flow in particular ways. Here's a fascinating one related to astrology. At the beginning of this section here, I say the Fibonacci sequence known as Paisano 9. So these number sequences, they're fundamental to nature. Fibonacci numbers are fundamental to nature. Things grow according to Fibonacci, the Fibonacci sequence. You can put the Fibonacci sequence into what we call a modulus function, a rhythm. If you set it into a rhythm of 9, Fibonacci in a 9 rhythm or 9 modulus function, these modulus functions are called Paisano periods. You put it into Paisano 9 and you get 24 repeating numbers. So a fellow who's an astrologer and investigator into many things, Russell Olhausen, he noticed that if you take these 24 numbers of Paisano 9 and you arrange them in a particular way around the circle, they match up and line up with the same pattern as the ruling planets of zodiac signs. Astrologers have this idea that Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, and the Fibonacci numbers put into a particular rhythm lay out exactly in the same way as the ruling planets of the signs do. That's a curious coincidence. Now, it may be that it's not that those ruling planets, like Mars ruling Aries, Venus ruling Taurus, is some kind of fact of nature. It might just be divination. It might be that by laying out the planets and setting them up with these rules, that Mars rules Aries, Venus rules Taurus, you've set up a similarity with a basic function of life, a basic mathematical sequence. This Paisano 9 seems to be very fundamental. And by doing that, in the process of reading the chart, you've created this resonating system. And you put your attention and your intuition into it, and it starts making things work. This is a process people are calling divination, whereby you divine. I don't like the word divine because it makes it sound like you're using some non-material, other kind of thing that's different from anything else. Whereas in reality, it may be that you're just setting up resonances and connections. If you don't set up resonances, things aren't fun. They don't work. They don't click. So most games that are engaging, they have these fundamental properties that we see working throughout mythology and astrology and beginning to be verified as having real tangible effects, as we found in our bipolar disorder and other research. So this is divination, is setting up rules that relate to some fundamental process in nature, and then by participating in it, it helps reveal things. The thing about divination is the rules are not true outside of the process of divination. Here's a real simple example. In voodoo, you know this, they have this idea, you make a doll and you stick pins in it or something, and that will create an effect on a person, kind of magic. Well, the magic here is not really something that's unscientific or cannot be explained in reasonable terms. It's that by investing your thoughts into this doll as a reflection of a person, you've just by your mental association of saying that this doll is this person and then touching it, you've set up a resonance with the person. Making the doll look somewhat like the person is going to increase the resonance, going to increase the similarity. Now, is that doll, if you're not focusing on it, is that doll actually a reflection of that person? No. It's only under the focused attention where you've defined it that way and thinking of it that way and participating in this activity that it sets up the resonance. It's just like singing a song. Before I sing the song or I play the music, there's no resonance. Once I play it and engage with it, there it is. So the thing about divination, it's only true during the process of the divination. And that's how divination is different from facts. This is why a lot of astrology works for the astrologer, and then when you test it, it does not work. It's not always just simply that the astrologers are delusional. In some cases that could be true, but in some cases the astrologer has set up this resonating system without even realizing it that helps reveal what's going on. So the answer to the question is astrology divination? The answer is that some astrology is divination. I'm going to suggest that not all astrology is divination, but some astrology is divination. So much of astrology is divination, much of it. This is why it works in practice, but does not work when studied scientifically. It does not work without the participation of the astrologer. Geoffrey Cornelius is a great leader of the astrology is divination point of view. He wrote the book Moment of Astrology, an excellent, detailed book. So if you want to learn more about astrology is divination, you can read that book by Geoffrey. Now, even Geoffrey Cornelius says that the empirically confirmed form of astrology is not impossible. So the fact that a lot of astrology is divination does not mean that all of it is, or that it must be in the future. He says in his book that it's quite possible that an astrology that is not divination could be developed. It would be something very different from astrology. Dean Roger said the same thing. Now, what's interesting is in the last 10 to 20 years, a rapidly increasing amount of research is strongly suggesting that there's something called an evidence-based astrology. There are rules that exist that do not depend on the participation of the astrologer, that are not part of divination, and they're not that different from the tools that astrologers use. Some people imagine that when this objective or evidence-based astrology or scientific astrology, whatever you want to call it, if it would ever happen, it would look very different. It would be about gravity and things like that. But no, it's some of the principles that astrologers use. We're finding that some of them work outside of the context of the astrologer participating in it. And now things have gotten very confusing because it's like separating out and finding that some things are divinatory, at least as far as we can tell right now, and some things actually are true outside of the participation of the astrologer. So recently, the nonprofit institute, Cosmobiology Institute, has been formed and developed, and to pursue these ideas and other individuals independently doing this research, getting stronger and stronger confidence that there are astrological variables that actually work. Far less than 1% of astrologers who are currently practicing today realize there's a massive transformation that is underway in astrology, a massive revolution. This is a hackneyed term, but a paradigm shift. There is a growing body of evidence that some astrological variables work. They work when you put it through the research. If you don't believe it, you can read the book I wrote on the astrology of bipolar disorder. You don't have to read the book. I've made a series of 9 videos. You can watch the 9 videos. I'm going to be making a video probably pretty soon on another astrology researcher, Michelle Love's work on anorexia and bulimia, eating disorders. Strong evidence, increasing evidence. There are some things that actually work. So we have divination and we have evidence-based. 2 very different things going on simultaneously in astrology. Now, there's some consequences of this. Let's say you learn a new idea. You learn about whatever, dispositors, mutual reception, some idea, fixed stars, who knows what, Arabic parts, endless numbers of ideas in astrology. And you try it out. You look at your chart, you look at charts of friends and family. Will it work? Here's the amazing thing. It usually will work. It usually will work. You might say, well, why would it work if it's not true? Because most of these ideas set up a resonance with fundamental principles of nature. And in the process of looking at it, you're creating the resonance, you're creating a divination that makes it work. So it does not work outside of the context of looking at it, but it does work when you look at it, because a lot of these rules have fundamental principles of symmetry and rhythms and beats and essential numbers in nature. And so they work when you use them. But they do not work if you just look at a database. It's quite mysterious. It's quite mysterious. It's like you're seeing it. It's like you're seeing a mirage. You're seeing it's there, then you look at it another way, it disappears. We have kind of some similar problems in physics where something can be a particle when you look at it one way, and then it's a wave. But it's true. This is what's happening. So the fact that a lot of astrology cannot be confirmed does not necessarily mean it's total nonsense. That seems obvious, but it's actually not true. It could be working within the context of what the astrologer is doing. So the big question in astrology is, what techniques work without the participation of the astrologer in the divinatory process? A lot of astrologers intuitively feel like, well, these ideas work. I mean, Aries is pioneering, Taurus is stubborn, Gemini is curious, Cancer is emotionally sensitive, Leo, is self-absorbed. They say these as facts. When you go and do the research, they're not true. But when you do people's charts, they are true. It seems inherently contradictory. But the resolution to why it's not contradictory is that in the process of doing it, you're putting your intuition, your heart, your soul, your attention into this, and you're creating this resonance, and you're selectively perceiving things that will come out from within the context of what you're resonating with. When looked at without your engagement, it disappears. So, if you do some anecdotal evidence and you see what works, it probably will work. That gives us extremely little confidence that it works outside the divinatory process. That's one of the shocking things for astrologers. It could be working beautifully for you, and as soon as you look at it outside the context of using within an astrological reading, it will not work. Now, the discovery that some of these ideas do work outside of the process of an astrological consultation, these rules for bipolar disorder, for bulimia, and anorexia are working in the databases. As we get more data, it appears that it works. We don't have 100% confidence. Maybe it will, someday it'll show that it doesn't work. But so far, we have over 50% confidence that these things are true. They actually exist. It's more likely they're true than they're not true. That these planetary configurations do tend to exist when people with bipolar disorder are born rather than not born. You have to read the research before jumping to conclusions about it. And then after you analyze the research and go through it, you can decide whether you agree with me or not. But these things that I'm suggesting actually exist outside of divination. They have, I'm going to read from this slide, they have wider applicability and will become part of mainstream professions. They will, because they work. This is what modern professions are about. Notice that quality control of divinatory practices is much more difficult than quality control of evidence-based principles. Evidence-based principles are relatively easy. We can gather more data, we can confirm them, we can see what happens when we apply them. Divination, it's a more subjective and much more difficult to assess what's going on. I'm not saying it's necessarily impossible, but it's very, very difficult. So somewhat surprisingly, these evidence-based methods in astrology that are growing rapidly, most astrologers have no idea that this is going on. It is going on. You can go to the Cosmobiology Institute free presentations, go to cosmobiology.org, get on the mailing list, learn about it. There's other organizations doing things like this as well. You can watch, I've made over 700 videos, you can watch some of those on the evidence-based methods and discoveries. These evidence-based methods are hiding in plain sight. Certain midpoint configurations and certain vibrations under certain conditions, they are being confirmed as working in the databases, independent of the astrological consultation. So that's very fascinating. We do not have to go to a completely different model of using gravity or something else. Right within the framework of astrology, we're finding things that actually do work. So, divination and evidence-based information are two different things that can be a part of an astrological consultation. When you go to an astrologer, or if you are an astrologer, and this astrological consultation is going on, what is happening? Is the astrologer just delusional? Are they using scientific principles? Number one, a lot of it is divination. Its resonance is being set up with rules that reflect rules in nature. And in that engagement of the astrologer, it begins to work. It does not work outside of that. Some of it's divination. Some of it could be evidence-based information. The people who are in this new movement of looking at this research and applying it are using evidence-based information that's confirmed through modern research methods. Way less than 1% of astrology is based on evidence-based information, like 1,000th of 1% if we're lucky. But it's growing, it's becoming more common. So those are two possibilities. Other things that happen, those are not the only two things. There's also intuition. You can think of intuition as an awareness that hasn't reached verbal awareness. We have a lot of awarenesses and sensitivities that we're not completely conscious of. They haven't been articulated consciously, but they're there. And some people can draw on that information. That's intuition and psychological insight. Psychological insight is listening skills. The ability to look at someone's posture, the intonation of their voice, pick up cues, understanding how people work, how important different motivations are. So, psychological insight, intuition, extreme version of intuition we call psychic, where, oh my God, like where did you get that from? That's an extreme level of intuition. Everybody has some levels of intuition. So, things that happen during astrological consultation, let's start from the top. Divination is one. Evidence-based information is 2. Intuition, 3. Psychological insight, 4. And the other things that happen are compassion and empathy. The astrologer just feeling for you, just quietly listening and absorbing your pain, your joys, your hopes, your concerns. This is a lot of what goes on in some astrological consultations. Just that person being there for you, not criticizing you, accepting you for who you are. And it's like you're taking the astrologer, and this is true for therapists, on a ride, and they're just looking with you to see what it is. They're on your side. Another thing that happens in astrological consultations is fuzzy thinking. The astrologer says, oh, well, you have Sun square Saturn, and therefore you have this problem. Well, the orb is like 8 degrees. They just saw 4 other clients with Sun square Saturn with small orbs. They didn't say anything for no particular reason. It's just you're not using rules consistently, clearly. You're just pulling out of a hat whatever rule you want to see. Very fuzzy, very... it's almost chaotic. There's no real strong reliance on the astrology as a tool to inform the astrologer. The astrologer is using it to confirm their own intuitions. And so sometimes they say one thing, sometimes they say another. Fuzzy thinking that it can facilitate intuition and psychological insight. The fuzzy thinking can actually be useful because the astrologer is looking at these astrological symbols, bending and twisting them according to what their intuition is telling them. And those symbols and stuff may help spur their intuition and their sensitivity. Then there's fuzzy thinking that just is a mess. It creates misinformation, just reinforces the a priori assumptions of the astrologer. It's wrong, and it's harmful. The astrologer tells you wrong things because they don't have good critical thinking skills when it comes to looking at astrology. They don't know how to evaluate it. They don't take any care to really test their ideas. They just go from one thing to the next. So there's a lot of fuzzy thinking. Another thing that happens in astrological consultations is sheer professionalism. Just them being there and having respect, keeping a certain distance from the client so that they can listen to you, that they can hold a sacred space with you, that they can keep everything you say confidential. They're not going to tell anybody. This respect and honor, this professionalism. These are all qualities, and there are other qualities of being professional. These are the things that happen in a consultation. You can think for yourself to what extent, or am I, if you're an astrologer, or if you've had an astrological consultation, to what extent was it divination? Probably to a large extent. To what extent was it evidence-based information? Probably little or none. To what extent was it intuition? Probably a lot. How much psychological insight? Usually a lot. How much compassion and empathy? Usually a lot. How much fuzzy thinking that facilitates intuition and psychological insight? Usually a good amount of that as well. How much fuzzy thinking that's just misinformation? That happens. That can happen a lot. With some astrologers a lot, with others not as much. And professionalism is, over the past few decades, has improved in the field of astrology because astrological organizations are emphasizing it. So you can share in the comments below. In the comments below, I'd love to hear your experience and your perceptions of what you've noticed is going on in astrology, in the part of the world and in the ways that you've engaged with astrology. And maybe there's some other things I didn't think of that happen. These are the things that happen. My personal interest is evidence-based information. I'm so excited that that's just my thing. But astrologers can do good work, amazingly, even though the astrology, when taken out of the context of the consultation, doesn't work. That's bizarre, but true. It's kind of dangerous because you're running a fine line of possibly just giving misinformation, making stuff up that isn't true. But some astrologers manage to do it very well. So, is astrology divination? Here's our answer. Divination is one component of astrology. It's one component. Other elements of astrology are evidence-based information, intuition, psychological insight, compassion, empathy, and fuzzy thinking, and professionalism. Each astrologer uses different percentages of these components. Evidence-based information is very new, and right now extremely few astrologers incorporate this into their work. I'm making this video towards the end of 2024. Okay, so there's the answer to the question, is astrology divination? And more broadly, what is astrology? As we experience it, it's not quite as simple as some of the believers in astrology believe and some of the cynics of astrology believe. There are these different things that are happening during the consultation. And the one that's been overlooked a lot and only recently introduced by people like Jeffrey Cornelius is the divination. So I focused a lot on that. So thank you very much, my friends. We're at a little over 40 minutes, a little longer than usual. So if you've watched this all the way through, thank you very much. If you subscribe to this channel, thank you so much. It helps YouTube get the word out to more people, promote it as they see that people like this and they're supporting it. There's also a membership. If you want to meet with me regularly live online, you can become a member, and there is a fee for that. Of course, subscription is free, but if you want to meet with me live online, there's a program for that as well. Here's information about becoming a member. Thank you so much, my friends. God bless. Namaste.